and who is going to, so Andreea-Maria is going to talk to us about
nature's
Plotinus.
consciousness and
Yes,
Plotinus.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you first to both Mateusz for inviting me today. I'm happy to be part of the conference, and I'm happy to bring this contribution on native consciousness in Plotinus, which is actually part of my current research project on cosmic sympathy in Neoplatonism. So, thank you. In Saving the Appearances, a study in idolatry, Barfield argues that consciousness precedes the material world of phenomena, and as you reminded, Mateusz even adopts the Plotinian concept of participation, exousia, which is central to Plotinus' doctrine of nature's soul and consciousness. But what is exactly nature's consciousness according to Plotinus? That would be our first question, of course. And we will take nature here so simultaneously as the earth, as physis and ananke at the same time. And how is that consciousness related to the idea of the unity and indivisibility of the whole? That hen zoon topan, Plotinus always insists upon, as Plotinus and later Iamblichus would very much emphasize it, is that consciousness in nature, perception, is it sentience, aesthesis and pathein? Is it awareness of the world and reaction to it? Is it self-awareness, the ancient Greek concept of syneidesis, as in the capacity to differentiate the subject from the object, hence subjectivity, and the self from everything else? Is it intentionality? Is it intelligence, nous, or logos, rationality? Is consciousness all of these criteria put together? Is it just a few of them, or none at all? As humans, we tend to project our own form of consciousness upon the world and upon nature. But nature's consciousness, as Plotinus understood it, was not an anthropomorphic form of consciousness, because it was not a reductionist understanding of consciousness. And this is precisely why Plotinus was so dear to Barfield. Plotinus's theory, on the contrary, is based on his doctrine of the prodos, the procession of the world soul from the one through the nous, and on the supremacy of invisible realities over material and visible realities. However, Plotinus did, of course, not confuse consciousness and soul, since consciousness would be something emanating from the divine nous, which was already poikilos, manifold, multiple, and divided, according to Plotinus. So this poikilos, manifold nous actually led to the world soul, according to Plotinus. And another major question arising from this idea of a consciousness pervading nature is, of course, should Plotinus be considered as a pantheist philosopher or not? Well, to begin with, a key point to enlighten these major topics holding huge metaphysical and eschatological implications is Plotinus's theory of cosmic sympathia, on which Plotinus's doctrine of nature's consciousness relies. And this theory of cosmic sympathia is deeply rooted in Plotinus's doctrine of the relationship between the parts and the whole, as you showed earlier in Mateusz. According to Plotinus, the earth is endowed so first to begin with a nous, then with the soul, a sensitive power, and a body. It is therefore like the entire universe, which it reproduces on a small scale. So this is the law of the correspondence between microcosm and macrocosm, of course. So the universe is a single animal, hands-on, endowed with the capacity to feel on all the levels of reality, from the highest level of the nous to the intermediate level of the soul, and eventually to the lowest level, that of matter. This is why, according to Plotinus, who puts it in a very poetic way, the earth can, I quote, hear our prayers and answer them, unquote. And this was not because the earth would have ears just like us, obviously, but rather because nature possesses a specific form of consciousness, according to Plotinus. It is more specifically in the fourth Ennead that we find the more consistent sources on Plotinus's doctrine of nature's consciousness as a cause rather than a consequence of the universe, understood as a single living being identified with a great body emanating from a universal soul whose parts, beings just as much as individuated souls, are in constant relationship to one another. The entire life of the universe, according to Plotinus, is rationally regulated. It is not accidental, which is why each being fulfills a precise role and movement in the universe, according to Plotinus, a movement that Plotinus identifies with a dance. So this is a beautiful quote from the fourth Ennead about the universe as a single animal and its universal soul. So I quote, "The universe is a single animal, hands-on, which contains in itself all animals, and that there is in it a single soul, psychemia, which communicates itself to all its parts, that is, to all beings which are part of the universe. Now, every being that is contained in the sensible world is a part of the universe. First, it is a part of it by its body, without any restriction. Then it is still a part of it by its soul, but only in so far as it participates in the world soul. Beings who participate only in the natural and vegetative power, dynamis of the soul, of the world soul, are completely parts of the universe. This universe is therefore a single animal and sympathetic to itself. The parts which seem to be far apart are nevertheless close to each other, just as in each animal the horns, the nails, the fingers, the organs which are far apart from each other feel, in spite of the interval which separates them, the affection felt by one of them. Indeed, as soon as parts are similar, even if they are separated by an interval instead of being placed next to each other, they sympathize by virtue of their similarity, and the action of the one that is distant is felt by all the others. Now, in this universe, which is an animal and forms a single being, there is no thing so distant by the place it occupies as not to be close because of the nature of this being, which its unity makes sympathetic to itself." Unquote. So, according to Plotinus, the universe is that animal everywhere sympathetic to itself, possessing a unique soul, a single soul, which it transmits to all its parts. Each individual and each individualized soul participates in the global collective world soul from which it emanates, just like a river participates in the source it comes from, of course, and it participates also in the ocean it goes to. Plotinus takes the example of a bull, a ram, or a stag, as indicated by his reference to the horns, but also of the coordination and codependency of the organs, which recalls the medical origin, actually, of the doctrine of cosmic sympathia as found in Galen. Indeed, since each part of the universe resonates with all the others, all of them, I quote, feel the affection experienced by one of them, unquote. And if this is so, physical distance, that is to say space, the interval between two parts of the same whole, is no obstacle to this common pathein for Plotinus, insofar as it is not topical proximities which matter here, but participation in the same whole, essence, ousia, power, dynamis, or action, energeia. And that is why the action of a distant part is felt by all the others. As for us, human beings, I quote, if the universe is sympathetic to itself because it constitutes a single animal, we are affected because we are contained in this single animal and form parts of it, unquote. And the sympathetic cosmos is the very cause of nature's consciousness understood as a constant interaction of all the parts which put together result, of course, in the whole. We could therefore wonder if these individuated parts, if these differentiated parts were really individuated, if the paradox from the one to the many is real, or if individuation itself, through Plotinus's concept of metousia, would be but a mere illusion or a deceiving appearance. In other words, only the image, eikona, of the primordial substance, so the cora of the Timaeus, would change and transform because it has the ability of imitation, of mimesis of the eternal forms, but not the substance itself, which is within itself unchanging and eternal. Plotinus was very much influenced in this approach of nature by the pre-Socratics, of course, and through his theory of the global consciousness of nature, he was first and foremost following Plato's Timaeus 30d and 69c. So let us read the specific passage he drew upon in Timaeus 30d. I quote, "When the Maker made our world, what living thing did he make it resemble? Let us not stoop to think that it was any of those that have the natural character of a part, for nothing that is a likeness of anything incomplete could ever turn out beautiful. Rather, let us say it down that the universe resembles more closely than anything else that living thing of which all other living things are parts, both individually and by kinds. For that living thing comprehends within itself all intelligible living things, just as our world is made up of us and all the other visible creatures. Since the God wanted nothing more than to make the world like the best of the intelligible things, complete in every way, he made it a single visible living thing, which contains within itself all the living things whose nature is to share its kind," unquote. This hands-on has a global consciousness, but it is also made of individual collective souls, such as those of plants, according to Plotinus. So Plotinus wrote an amazing text on ensouled plants in Aeneid, in the 5th Aeneid, second paragraph, where he provides us with a fascinating theory according to which plants do possess both soul and consciousness. Actually, this theory of plants possessing an invisible soul seems, well, could seem to us rather animistic than pantheistic, but it is actually part of Plotinus's general doctrine of the world soul. This idea was later, much later, supported by Charles Darwin, and contemporary research in botanics, neuroscience, and physics demonstrated that plants do indeed have a kind of consciousness in the form of a root brain. Plants possess perception, sentience, associative learning, biological clocks, communication, as well as memory storage and recall. And although plants do not possess neurons, they do have another cognitive system based on their cells. And when it comes to the soul and consciousness of plants, although they are part of the lowest realm of reality among the allegory, Plotinus says in Aeneid 5:2. So I quote, "The higher soul seems to reach as far as plants, for the life principle in plants belongs to it. So it goes on from the beginning to the last and lowest. Let us go back to plant souls. If you were to cut off or burn the root of a plant, where would the soul of the root be? In soul, for it has not gone in another place. It could be in the same place, but in another, if it ran up again to the higher soul. If it did not, it would be in another plant's soul, and if it ran up again, it would be in the power dynamis before it." Unquote. Since soul is located everywhere, we could say that it is at the same time located nowhere, and it participates in the higher dynamis that came before it, which participates itself in the higher nous. And plants, according to Plotinus, were the very first life form on Earth, Zoe, of course, which Plotinus acknowledged as part of the divine, most interestingly, since the divine, according to Plotinus, pervades and permeates everything and shows no limits. The divine is limitless. And to put it in other words, well, if matter was deprived of the divine, it would mean that the divine is limited, that it does have a limited power. But for Plotinus, nothing in the realm of being, including matter, is deprived of the divine, because each part of reality participates in the whole and in the divine through the well soul and through the nous. Plotinus was not a dualist, but rather a monist, because of his concept of emanation, which involves a continuity between all the realms of being and no oppositions between, well, mind and matter. According to Plotinus, both ensouled or lowest forms of material realities participate in the dynamis, power, or in the dynamis, which came before it, which it precisely emanates from. This theory is actually quite close to what Peter said earlier about energetic matter and matter as being infused with energy, but here in the sense of the Plotinian dynamis, which would mean the capacity to be transformed into energeia, the passage, the Aristotelian passage from dynamis to energeia. And actually, Plotinus also agreed with this theory through the concept of metousia. And to put it otherwise, matter was, well, indeed, somewhat spiritual, according to Plotinus, because it participated in the nous, again, even though it was not identified with it, because, of course, Plotinus thought that the divine was transcendent and not only immanent to the material world. Another interesting point of Plotinus's theory of cosmic sympathy, and I will be soon done, don't worry about the lunch. So another interesting point of Plotinus' theory of cosmic sympathy is that of the Earth conceived as a single living being, and so the codependency of its part, as we said. And to illustrate this property, Plotinus takes very often the example of plants and stones, actually, which both grow in the bosom of Earth and cease to grow when they are torn from it. The following text of Plotinus' Fourth Aeneid expresses very clearly the association between, well, the Earth and the goddess Demeter on the one hand, Gaia also, of course, and on the other hand, the metaphysical association between the soul and the higher nous, in which it participates. This passage is very important to understand the way in which the parts of nature, understood as a whole, do communicate, according to Plotinus. More specifically, to understand the role of what Plotinus called the universal vegetative power, topan phytikon, in nature's and Earth's consciousness. I quote, "If the Earth communicates to plants the power to beget and grow, she possesses this power in herself and gives only a vestige of it to the plants, which owe her all their fecundity and are in a way the living flesh of her body. She gives them what is best in them, which makes the difference between a plant inherent in the earth and a branch cut from it. The former is a true plant, the latter is only a piece of wood. What then does the soul which presides over the body of the earth communicate to it? To understand this, it is enough to notice the difference between a piece of earth inherent in the soil and a piece that has been detached from it. It is also easy to recognize that stones grow while they are in the bosom of the earth, whereas they remain in the same state when they have been torn out of it. Every existing thing, therefore, has in it a vestige of the universal topan phytikon, vegetative power, proper to any of its parts. As for the sensitive power of the earth, it is not mixed with its body like the vegetative power, it only assists it. Finally, the earth has also a soul superior to the preceding powers, and a nous soul and logos, to which men who are led by their nature and by divine inspiration to reveal these things to us, give the name of Demeter and Vesta, unquote. So each thing plucked from the bosom of the earth has within it, as Plotinus puts it, a vestige of the universal vegetative power. The relationship between the parts and the whole is deeply connected, actually, to the process of differentiation and individualization, which comes with the paradox of the one to the many, and the reverse process of epistrophe from the divided, differentiated parts to the one, the epistrophe here. So the return of the general parts, of the individuated parts of nature to the global consciousness of nature, to the collective consciousness. Plotinus, through his doctrine of unending movement in the universe, that unending cycle between prodos and epistrophe, was quite close to actually the contemporary paradigm of the continuous expansion and contraction of the universe. And actually, what we could say about Plotinus's doctrine of nature's consciousness is maybe that Plotinus was not so much a pantheistic philosopher, because transcendence is a key concept in his philosophy, but had maybe a rather panentheistic approach of nature and of nature's consciousness. This specific approach has a formidable strength because it is compatible with the idea of a simultaneously transcendent and immanent divine within the universe. The simultaneous transcendence and immanence of the divine is the key to Plotinus's theory of cosmic sympathy, and therefore also to his doctrine of nature's consciousness, not as a kind of pure awareness of itself, nor as the ability to discriminate between subject and object, but rather as intentionality, or as what Jung, who was, as we know, very much influenced by Neoplatonism, would later call the collective unconscious in the world. So thank you for all the braves here who listened until the end, despite the hunger and the weariness and the tiredness. Thank you.